Joining me here on console is Quincy Harp, who is the mission designer for the HTV activities. Thanks for joining us, Quincy.
Thanks for having me here.
So first of all, I think this is the first time I've heard of a mission designer. It sounds very glamorous. Can you explain to us just a little bit about what that job entails?
Sure thing. Well, in robotics, we've kind of got two kind of positions. We've got our lead robotics officer, and his primary job is to integrate with the rest of the team. And for this mission, his name's John Bellingham. He's actually Canadian, and he works with us through this Canadian Space Agency. And my job is the mission designer. And in that position, we basically look at the requirements of where hardware comes up or where entire vehicles come up and where they need to be installed, and we design the path in between those two spots.
And you were explaining to me this process started at least a year ago, that the two of you were working together on this?
Missions typically start being planned about a year ahead. I was not assigned to this one until about 8 months ago, but typically there's about a year-long process with looking at the information and getting ready to go and going from there.
So you hit the ground running.
Very quickly, very quickly.
And how big of a team does it take to support these types of activities?
It varies from time to time. Typically, you'll have about a 3-person team that follows the entire mission the whole way through. But when it comes down to the actual execution, you have largely as many people as you need, whether it's the 3 people that are on console actually executing or the next 3 people that are coming on after that team.
So bring us up to speed. A lot's gone on. Everything's gone really smoothly, but can you talk to us a little bit about especially the things that occurred over the weekend?
Sure thing. It's been a great last weekend so far. We actually captured the vehicle on Friday. The crew used the Space Station Robotic Arm, or Canadarm2, to capture the vehicle, and then from that point on, the ground took control of it in order to help save the crew time, give them their time back, and we were able to maneuver the HTV vehicle all the way to its install location and install it, thereby giving the crew back all the time that they needed. After that was completed, we had kind of one day off before we came back on yesterday, Sunday, and then continued on with a lot of our ground commanded activities to extract the exposed pallet from the HTV. And it's coming up carrying a couple different experiments for us, as well as a couple different replacement pieces of hardware for the space station. We extracted that. Then we maneuvered it to position, handed off to the Japanese robotic arm, which they also controlled from the ground. And from that point, they took it and installed it on their back porch, kind of their exposed facility is what it's actually called. And once it was there, it's ready for its transfers now.
So this was a lot of teamwork with the crew, a lot of things that you guys were taking versus parts that they were picking up and operating from the space station. So it really exemplifies kind of the ultimate teamwork, if you will, ground control teams and on-orbit crew members.
Oh, absolutely, and very international too. We've got U.S. and European crew members on orbit executing steps, as well as both Canadian and American robotics experts executing their steps, and Japanese experts executing their steps. So it's truly showing the International Space Station.
So everything that happened starting Friday and over the weekend sounds really critical, but you were telling me that really you guys have some of your biggest milestones are yet to come.
Absolutely. A lot of the dynamic parts happened on Friday, but when it comes to a lot of the down and dirty kind of ground control work, a lot of that's coming up in about 2 weeks, where we're going to use, again, Canadarm2, along with Dexter, the small dexterous robot that we have, to transfer those pieces of hardware that came up on that exposed pallet and get those to their final locations on the space station. That's going to take about 6 days of ground control operations, but we're looking forward to that. It's a significant amount of work to do, but we expect it to go well.
So I'm curious, which of all these activities is the most challenging?
Typically, the capture and the release of HTV itself is the most challenging, just because you've got 2 vehicles flying in space at extreme amounts of speed, and they've got to come together. You've got a lot of integration that has to go on with the entire team to make sure that those things turn out well. While robotically those are complex, probably the most complex for us is those upcoming operations we have in about 2 weeks.
And that's just because there's so much to happen.
Exactly.
So you said 6 days worth.
That's
pretty
what we
full
think.
days?
Yeah, we're expecting pretty full days, 6 solid days of those operations to get all those things going. And it's pretty small interfaces that you're operating from the ground here up to a robot in space. So it's a cool factor to the job, but it is a complication.
Yeah, I think sometimes we make things look so easy because they go well, but so much time and effort goes into that pre-planning. Can you tell us a little, you mentioned the 2 vehicles traveling and those dynamic operations. Can you maybe explain for some folks who can't really appreciate how challenging that might be, what really goes into that, and when do you guys really get to breathe a sigh of relief?
Oh, yeah. Um, from the overall perspective, it's definitely a significant rendezvous problem. If nothing else, to put these two vehicles in the same space is amazing. And I don't know rendezvous very well, but I've heard it described as trying to stand in the backyard and throw a tennis ball while somebody in the front yard tries to throw a tennis ball and make them touch just slightly on the way across. So that's always very complicated. Um, as well as doing the constant robotics that we're doing. We've built a lot of good techniques over the years with a lot of the ground control and everything else to make things better, but it still is very complicated. But in the end, we really aren't comfortable until we finally get to that final release day on HTV and we see the vehicle departing and everything's completed well. At that point, then we'll be able to relax a little bit.
Well, we hope that everything continues to go well. And why we have you, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to this position that you have now?
Oh, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll shorten it up. I lived in the area in high school and always kind of wanted to work at NASA, so I started in some early student programs, an actual high school program, and I transitioned that into what's called a co-op program when I was in college, and even transitioned into graduate co-op. So I got a lot of time to see a lot of the things going on at Johnson Space Center, and ended up liking working in robotics and robotics flight control, and have been doing that job for the most part ever since. Did a brief stint in a Russian support group, so I spent some time in Moscow. But otherwise, it's been great being in robotics.
Well, again, congratulations on all the activities this weekend, and we will all continue to watch and look forward to the upcoming activities and hope that we can have that same relief with you whenever the release happens and all that goes well. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Again, Quincy Harp, the mission designer, as it were, for the current HTV activities going on board the International Space Station.